All right. Hello. Welcome, everybody, to According to Andrew number 30. I wanted to look at different government types and how they might look in an American setting. Um, as you guys know, uh, American ideology is very kind of interesting and unique to the world. And so when you have these other political and ideological influences on it, what kind of things are kept from the American side or American traditions and habits, and what parts are pulled from the other one, and what is that new kind of ideology or version of that ideology synthesized into whether it comes to American communism or American fascism or American populism. So today we're going to talk about American fascism and what that might look like. So, let's define fascism because it doesn't really have a great definition. And you can reject my definition if you like, but the way I kind of see it or look at it is a right wing movement that focuses on nationalism, where the interests of the individual are secondary to that of the nation. Um, so the big thing that this changes are the so there's three kind of this was seen as the third option to the society of post World War One, pre World War Two era societies, because at first it was like there was with um, what's his name trying to make the world safe for democracy and the monarchies dying out. There wasn't a really great place for those post monarchical areas that wanted to have a semblance of the monarchical ruling, and uh, and thought both sides of the coin, whether it be American liberalism, which is was radically different than the monarchy system that they had before, or communism, which is also a market radicalism in just kind of a different aspect. Both those were very uncomfortable for people who were much more reactionary and conservative. So fascism kind of filled that hole, and uh, the hole that it filled was kind of bridging this gap that of the two extremes that communism and uh, liberalism kind of take. So the liberal agenda puts the individual above all else, and the and is like and obviously has hierarchies and stuff like that, and it's to like kind of an extreme degree, but it doesn't really seem to acknowledge. It's kind of psychopathic in that it doesn't really acknowledge that we're people are tribal. We like to live in groups and have our hierarchies and stuff like that. Well, they acknowledge hierarchies, but um, it's overly individualistic for the average person, especially in those times. And then the other option was communism, and communism was kind of the opposite of that. It was everyone's the same. There is no hierarchies. Individualism is a thing of the past, and that didn't really work either because it's like, well, we still have individuals, we still have hierarchies. These are important things to us. We still believe in like this. There might not be monarchies, but we still believe in the core idea of rulers and that kind of what monarchy stood for. So fascism kind of came in to fill that role where they're like, okay, so we have individuals, we believe in individuals, and we believe in hierarchy, but the individual's will is subject to the state. The individual's will is subject to, well, basically, they kind of made it inflated into state slash nation, um, pretty much on purpose. But the idea was, uh, just because you want something, if it's not good for the tribe, it's not going to be allowed. And this is generally uh, you have like rules and stuff like that that come from religion, but a lot of the cultural rules that get developed are based and grounded in this um, subservient to the betterment of the overall group over the wills and whims of the individual. So that is how I see fascism. Uh, you guys might disagree, but that's kind of where I'm going at it from the American perspective. So fascism in Germany was a right-wing reactionary movement to the communist influence that was taking over Germany. Due to the prevalence of Antifa and other communist agitators, this is the likely catalyst to get it to rise in America. Also, like in Germany, American fascism will be steeped in nationalism, as all fascist movements are. But in America, there will be differences. When Mussolini and Hitler took power, they had a national. Their their goal was a nationalistic return to power. For for Italy, it was Rome, and for Germany, it was the German Empire that had fallen during World War One. If we look at Trump's message in comparison to these, there is some similarities there, but I want to point them out to highlight how Trump's message isn't fascist and is populist, even though there are certain things that ring to make it sound like they're very similar. So if we look at Trump's message for comparison, there are certainly some elements that match. There is a nationalist callback to a time of former glory, and that time, while not defined by Trump, but that time is not well defined by Trump. And the case in point is that it's a callback, like when you think of Make America Great Again and the MAGA slogan, it doesn't actually specify like a time. Whereas if you compare that to your Germany and your Italy, they're both like, Italy's like, I want to go back to Rome. That's sure, Rome had a long history, so it's like, where maybe specifically in the Roman heritage, do you want to be more empire, do you want to be more republic? Due to Mussolini being a dictator, probably more the empire side. And Germany was like, we want to basically all the good things that were great about the German Empire, we want that back. We want our previous borders back. Those kind of things were the driving forces. Whereas Trump is like, well, let's make America great again. It's like, okay, well, what does that mean? And it's a genius phrase because it allows you to fill in whatever you want. So, the main issue with Trump's message and why it falls under populism and not fascism is because of the state of the American nation. Due to centuries of immigration, America has lost its American identity, and those who can trace their lineage back to a time of the founding are becoming fewer and fewer. This is why the messaging is vague. Make America Great Again is one of the best political slogans, as it conveys a lot and nothing all at the same time through projection. It makes a clear statement of America, that America was great and that it can be great again. And I, being Trump, is the person that will get you there, and if someone else uses it, basically any other political person. But there is no divine point of reference to say when America was great. As such, it is left to the person hearing the message to imagine what that phrase means to them and project the meaning onto Trump, making him whatever they want him to be. It is a similar phenomenon can be found in books where the protagonist isn't well described and is described as a pair of pants. Basically, the person reading the story is supposed to be the person that be the protagonist, and therefore they're written to be a very boring, drab, and dry type person, so that the person reading it can project what they want the character to be into the character and basically fill and be that character and live out that kind of fantasy. This is it's found in books and obviously like video games a little bit in the same way, where you're playing you play as the character and they don't really say anything, and therefore you like a lot of times they don't have voice acting for the character, and therefore it allows you to pretend you are the character in the thing. So this is kind of what the Make America Great Again slogan does. Because of that, Trump and Trumpism is populism, and it is not Americanism. And we'll get back to that. So, what does American fascism look like? So, interestingly, the fascii is, and the reason it was invented in Italy of all places, is because it's a callback to the Roman times. As we can see with this marble statue of George Washington, he's got this fasciae right next to him. Fasciae is a bundle of sticks, and the idea behind it is that we are stronger together than we are apart. If you there's a old proverb where it's the man hands a kid a stick, and he's easily able to break it, and then he hands him a bundle of sticks, and he can't break it. And this is to symbolize that as a group, we are stronger than individually. And this is, a truism that has been true since the beginning of time. And so it's something that's harkened back in our own philosophy, along with being America's, because they have pulled a lot of symbolism and stuff from Rome. And it's just, a truism of being in the world. So what does America's brand of fascism look like? The biggest problem that we have, and the biggest hurdle that America has to forming a fascist movement or identity or whatever, is that it needs an identity. It doesn't. What is America has been so watered down and lost over the centuries with this whole melting pot idea that it's just not really clear enough as to what America is. So they have to figure out what that identity is to rally around. And if they can do that, then there might be something there that could get moving. This probably won't start distilling down until lines start getting drawn around the pending balkanization of America. And at that point, maybe it just kind of turns into nationalism over like a strictly fascist type movement. And you could say the way I'm describing fascism is literally just nationalism, but there's maybe a couple other caveats into the fascist thing. I'll throw this in right now. Maybe one of the major caveats of fascism is it is also somewhat anti-religion, because it wants the state and the nation to be your central focus point of sentiment, and it allows the ruling class to control the zeitgeist and the population better if there is no religious basis, and it allows them to get away with more, basically. But I'll touch on that a little bit more in a second here. So there's two ways to conform. So we can go the balkanization route, where things are getting kind of heated and stuff boils over. The other is if Biden actually gets in. I don't think he will. But and they decide to implement a bunch of lockdowns and draconian measures. They pack the court. They do everything to just undermine the sanctity of the state as much as possible. That could give an onus and rise to some kind of fascistic type leader that will restore order, set things back in straight motion, and those standing up against those things could create the backlash to an identity that people could rally around. Those key identities that they would rally around would be American virtues of freedom, American exceptionalism, because both of the ruling class and stuff like that are trying to demoralize people by saying you don't have a right to freedom. Freedom isn't a thing that's American, which is just, for all the Americans left, is something that they just intrinsically revile against. And the idea that when Trump's phrase "Make America Great Again" might be like a populist message, but it turns into a more nationalist type message when you have people in like the Democratic Party and stuff like that saying things like America was never great. That's when it becomes like potential defining aspect of your identity of like, no, we are great. We've always been great, and we're going to use American exceptionalism to prove that we're great again. So in that way, it can get tied into there. And then the last part that could get tied in is a harkening back to a Christian identity. And this is where I said the Christian. So the Christian aspect is hard to determine if it will be part of a whole fascistic government, because they like putting national identity above all others, as it gives them more political control. As such, Christianity being involved is far from a given in this whole identity. Now, I think just because of the weakness of the American identity as it is, religion will be a core pillar of that, and the amount that the left really hates religion also will create a backlash to create it as a American pillar. And so you could argue because the Christianity is in there, maybe it makes it so that what is typically seen as fascism doesn't truly develop, and it's more of a Christian nationalist type view. But that's kind of neither here nor there. We'll just kind of continue with what we got going on. So, how are they going to use the idea of freedom to impose the opposite of that, right? Because that's the thing that is a lot of times with these ideologies, they'll use things and like invert them. So, one of the ways that this could happen is this virtue of freedom will be tied to an understanding that not everyone is willing or capable of freedom. So, a great example of this is all the people that are calling for lockdowns right now are like, okay, well, you clearly can't handle freedom. You've told and showed us that you can't handle freedom, and therefore we don't believe that you should have the same rights as someone who is willing to handle the responsibilities that freedom entails. So you are going to be considered a second-class citizen until you get to the point of being able to prove your worth, that freedom, you deserve the responsibility that comes with freedom. That is kind of like how you could sell this. Because of how America is set up and how we don't have like a history of monarchs and a nobility, like a set nobility. The idea that part of the American exceptionalism thing is the idea that anybody can rise through the ranks. I think you're going to have a class system, but it'll be a soft class system. Something that allows, and it kind of ties into the Civ Nat type thing, because if you're going to have an American empire and you create a hard class system, it's just like with how everything's working right now, you're just going to have a massive civil war explode. And you still might, but this soft system could potentially mitigate that or sidestep the issue enough that they'd be able to get it through. So the idea is you're not willing to take on the responsibilities. You create this soft class system by going back to some of the American roots, and this ties in with the idea of going back and referencing a key part of the past and saying this is how we want to be, this is how we want to base our society off of the ideals of the past. And so one of those things might be like land ownership, right? You have to be able to own land, and you could tie it into, this would be great. You're not considered owning the land unless you don't have debt, which would be a great way to incentivize people to not have debt and own land. So that's absolutely great. Well, this is more me dreaming at that point, but what else we got? So that was a way you could create like a delineated class system that would work within the American structure. And there's that. There we go. And just to go back to the fascii thing, as you can see with Abraham Lincoln, he's sitting next to two fascii as well. So it is something that is part of the American tradition, as it were. So we're gonna shoot back to that guy. So that covers how that would come to power, but then obviously there's going to be some resistance, right? We've already seen Antifa and stuff like that rioting in the streets. They are not going to go quietly into the night, especially considering the amount of institutions that they control. And so to deal with that, what's going to happen? So the fascist movement. Oh, never mind. Yeah. So what are they going to do with that? So you have a couple things that could happen. So if a fascist type leader came into America and has started to do the smackdown on all the cultural movements and all the other stuff that was going on in America, as you've seen with President Trump's presidency, who's been pretty lenient on them overall, they would be very resistant to this whole system and the uprooting of all of their gatekeeping and institutional um, subversions that they've been able to do over the past, I don't know, they started in like the 60s. So that would, if somebody came in and tried to unroot 80 years of progress in a very short period of time, it'd be interesting to see what would happen. Obviously, that conflict is going to play out narratively kind of interestingly, but then on top of that, you're going to have potential civil war type things. So uh, this would leave the communists to either flee or fight, and being how entrenched they currently are in these institutions, they wouldn't want decades of work to get thrown away in such a short notice, and so they would push back. Is kind of where I see it. To address kind of a side thing, fascist movements were typically imperialist. However, I think this had to do more with the ideal of Italy and Germany, and they were trying to get back to the ideology itself being expansionist. Oh, and what they were trying to get back to more than the ideology itself being expansionist. Apologies. Um, so in Italy's case, they wanted to restore the old Roman borders, and in Germany's case, they wanted to restore the old German borders. And because of that, what they were hearkening back to led them to a path of imperialization. Whereas in America's case, that wouldn't necessarily be the case because they are the struggle is internal and not external. Um, and so there might be some conflict, there might be some war or something like that, or maybe just um, a draining of the swamp, proverbially, as they say. But I don't think you would have this fever pitch to go and conquer other countries. Now, maybe that you don't consider that a fascist movement at that point. That's fine. You're gonna have to give your own definition then. Um, but that's kind of my perspectives on the whole thing. So that's to sum up. That's kind of how I see a potential what fascism in America would potentially look like if that was going to rise in power. Due to the current state of things, I don't see that happening. I see a much more the much more likely case is either populism kind of swings in and brings America back from the brink, as it has a couple of times throughout history, or you have a Caesarism type thing, which might be a little aligned with the fight with some of the points that I have in the fascist type thing, but is centered more around a singular great man type figure, and isn't necessarily tied into ideology, more a great person and their thoughts on how political entities should be run. Uh, so that kind of wraps that up. Thank you guys for listening. Please like, share, and subscribe. This is on YouTube. I just started uploading on BitChute, so go check that out. I'm going to try to get all the other spots up. Oh, I have these on Podbean now, if you guys want to listen to it. I only have one up right now, and they'll be up from 29 going forward. And for the free account, I'm limited to amount of space, so there will probably be only like 10 to 20 of these up at a given time. So just keep that in mind if you are on Podbean. Other than that, thank you guys for listening, and have a good day.